Sylvia.
So welcome back, everyone. And actually, I have someone on the stage with me for the first time during this 4-day conference. Of course, because of social distancing, we have to limit the kinds of contacts or semi-contacts we have. Welcome back to Water and Beyond. Hashtag Water and Beyond if you have any comments. And we're going to get down to the environment now. The first session was about jobs, about employment, about education, and now we're going to be talking about environment, and who better, well, among those to have with us is Philippe. And Philippe, you are Philippe Mayaux, the head of Sector Biodiversity and Ecosystems Services at the European Commission, DG INTPA now it is called, right?
Indeed.
And which used to be DG DevCo, but now it's INTPA, which makes a lot of sense because it's about partnerships, and that's what we're talking about here today, partnerships in trying to solve this issue about water, that water is so interconnected. The European Commission's international partnership priorities include the Green Deal alliances, and of course we're going to be looking ahead to COP26 this November, and the environment and water being very much a part of what we're talking about in the environment. Lesha, Witmer, she's Lesha. Hello, hello again.
Hello.
Hello. You're very busy today.
Yes.
Let me just pass it to you now to take over the panel now.
Thank you very much, Chris. Welcome to everybody, wherever you are. I know there are people who are in their afternoons, there are people who are in their mornings, but like Marlos was telling me, it's not as bad as it was with a few other events he participated in. What we are doing in this session, I think, is quite unique for the whole conference, because we're trying to tackle two issues. One is the connection between water and environment, and that is a complicated one. So we had to pick and choose a little bit. So what we will talk about on one part is the relation between water, biodiversity, ecosystems, and especially also about nature-based solutions. And another one is the connection between water, pollution, and environment, where sanitation and then the whole chain of sanitation plays a big role. So it's not just the toilet, but it ends all the way down with where the sludge disappears to and how we use or not reuse that. So there are some very interesting speakers who will try and address some of these issues, and we know beforehand we will not do justice to every topic and everybody, but we do hope that the message across will be that water in itself is a value, and that water has a value for nature, for human beings, for our health, and that the way we manage our water has a huge impact on environment. So that's where we get started. You will hear from our panelists in a short introduction about what is closest to their hearts. And then we'll come back to them with questions. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will follow that and we'll try to answer. If we can't do it during this session, we'll try and figure out a way to reconnect with you in another way. And having said all that, I would point you to the website and to the bios of all the speakers that we have today. The tech team will display the connection to that in the chat box. And then let me introduce one of the grand ladies of water. Her name is Nchedi Moripe. She is the Chief Director of Global Cooperation in Strategic Partnerships. What could be more appropriate than in an event organized by INTPA? She's been around for quite a while, and she has been very influential in water management, water policy, water governance, She was a member of one of the Sherpas to the high-level panel on water. If you've missed out on that, please look it up. It's still worth your while with a lot of good advice. And she's going to talk a little bit about the policy and the way that South Africa tries to manage their waters, especially when it comes to sanitation and the impact on the environment. My great sister, Nchedi, the floor is completely yours.
Thank you so much, Lesha, Ms. Moderator, and good morning, good afternoon to all my fellow panelists, participants, and ladies and gentlemen participating and attending this. I really am happy to be talking to this topic. When I looked at it for the first time, I liked the inverted words that said this concept is about water and beyond. It can never be anything less than that, because we are now in a situation where, as countries, as people elsewhere, whether rural, urban, or wherever you are, we know that there are lines and pointers that are crossing, that are showing us that water can never be a standalone. It's a standalone. I don't mean that it's not important. What I mean is we find it everywhere. If anything has to work out, water has to be there. If I can find my first slide there, I would be able to then talk to it and explain why I'm saying what I'm saying. First slide, please. Thank you. If you look at this slide, you will see that I'm talking about issues of social. I'm talking about issues that talks to political and issues that are actually technical. You talk about environmentalists when you talk about water. They will tell you about all issues that that needs to be done that might impede urgent processes in ensuring that people get water as urgent as would want. You talk about social, people know, which is correct, that water is a human right, is a basic right, is anything that they need to be able to start and to finish their lives. And when you talk about issues of financial, you will get municipalities saying water must be paid for. We need to be pricing water. We need to know how costly water can be. And when you look at only these three, you will see how much the arrows are crossing and how much we are unable to come together. When you look at those rings that are in there, you think that it's easy to interact and to interrelate because they are all coming into each other. This to me shows how much water interrelates and interact and is in the space of each and every basic issue. Your policies definitely will tell you that. This will definitely tell you that how much we can afford to bring infrastructure is available for people. But then, for that to happen, we need to be talking intersectoral issues, which will then be the ones that will tell which are the priorities. Currently, as we are sitting as governments, I am very sure the priorities that should come in now. Are we going to prioritize water? As currently COVID-19 presented a narrative that says to us, this is a new challenge that says water should be prioritized because everyone needed to wash their hands. Everyone needed clean water. We needed hygiene where we are going to use water and all of that. But then you go to health. Health says we need vaccines, we need everything. Then this tells you how much we need men and women in government, in private sector, everywhere, who will be able to juggle these balls and see if we can't have the interaction that we see in this rings that I've shown, where I'm showing your social and your all the other interacting issues. this is where now I want to say to you, we can talk about water as one concept that definitely to us as South Africa, we considered, you can go to my second slide, we considered when we plan for sanitation. When you look at the percentages that we showed you there, you can see that the blue part is somewhat, I can say big. It shows that we've done a lot of progress. We are showing that we are going somewhere, but we still have 17% of people who does not have access to clean sanitation or decent sanitation in South Africa. You can look at the pie chart and see how far we've gone. This is the latest that came out from our Stats SA, our Statistics South Africa, where they are showing how much progress we've made. And after talking about that, I can assure you and tell you that I think seeing how much urgent it is for government to bring things like vaccines, which are also health issues that requires, that will never leave aside the issue of water, because while we'll be vaccinated, we will still need water, we'll still need to wash our hands. Therefore, I am saying that with the progress that we made, I am very sure, and it's my hope that our government will close those gaps that we are seeing there, where we are saying that these are the backlogs that we are still having. Can I go to my third one? Thank you. When you look at the policy of South Africa, we have developed a national sanitation policy in 2016. This already made an impact and progress into what we are doing already, because the statistics that I've already spoken to, the providing universal access, we are still remaining with the 17%, which is what we hope that going forward in the next 5 years or 10 years, we will talk about no backlog in terms of sanitation. Next slide. The biggest issue that I see, I don't know whether this is in all countries, is that government is definitely working on something that I can call a bottomless pit, because the more we try to cover the space or cover the universal access of what we want, the more we get the population growing. Therefore, access will always be there as new and fresh access that we never had before. But I cannot finish this before I can say that we definitely have to go back to the quote that was said by my former president, when he said, the very right to be a human is the very right to be human is denied every day to hundreds of millions of people as a result of poverty. The unavailability of basic necessities such as food, jobs, water, shelter, education, healthcare, and healthy environment has never been more true than today with what we are facing with this pandemic. Therefore, we can still stick to that quote that says it is definitely denying a human right to not have water and sanitation that is par to what everyone would want to see. I thank you. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Nchedi. My button wasn't working very well. We had a few problems with your connection, but I think most of your message came across quite clear. Could you answer me one question? If you look at the type of sanitation that the South African government is envisioning to provide or to help provide, how do you combine the environmental impacts and the health impacts? Is there a distinct policy for that, or is that something separate?
Departmental collaborative committees because definitely before we take any decision on the sanitation policy that we are implementing currently, we need to definitely ensure that we consult our environment department, which is a totally different department. And definitely now with COVID, it made it even more necessary for us to even consult the Department of Health, because even education, because when kids had to go back to school, it came out very clear in the rural areas that it was difficult for us to take back the kids to schools because they did not have clean water. It was difficult for them to be assured that the protocols will be followed. And it was Department of Health felt strong that water must be universal so that all the kids can go back to school. That tells you that there's no way we can separate the sectors. The interdepartmental, the intersectoral issue is more key in developing policy and implementing it.
Yeah, thank you, Nchedi. I think that's a very important remark, because what was brought up by some other people as well is that if we stay in our silos, we will not solve the problem, and that we need this horizontal coordination between departments and policies to make sure that what we do with the best intentions with one hand doesn't negatively impact another issue. Is there another thing that you think that we should take into consideration? As you know, the EU and the member states are now programming for their new program under the Green Deal, that they should pay specific attention to when they talk to you and other countries.
Yes, I think more than anything, Lesha, what makes me happy with this session today, it talks also more to partnerships. It is clear that as countries, we cannot do it alone. We cannot think that we can use our own technologies alone. It is important for us as countries to realize that there are those who are a little bit further than where we are today. We are trying to implement a few kinds of sanitation technologies. Most of them are still being piloted in the areas that does not have infrastructure. But I can state and tell you now that more than anything, what I want to emphasize is that we need partnerships. We're working with EU on a lot of things. We are working with other countries that we've got agreements with, and we want to learn more from them and get more advice and assistance as we co-share. We will also be able to expose what we can do best so that this whole thing is reciprocal. But definitely,
I think that is a very, very clear message, Nchedi. Please stay online, because there might be questions for you later. While I introduce the next speaker, and maybe our colleagues can bring up a slide first that shows you how you can see more about our speakers, but also the organizations they represent, especially the website. So if you want more information, take a screenshot of what the technicians will show. And if it doesn't work now, we'll do it later. No, something happening. I got the Windows logo now. Ah, thank you. Yes. So if you want to know more about the panelists, go to this page. You can probably click on this and then go there. And otherwise, you can go to the website and look up page 1801. And there's a list of websites of where the organizations that have speakers today can be reached. So I recommend you to have another look and stay connected to us. Having said that, I would like to introduce our next speaker. I think it's very interesting that you took another angle to the same topic, Philippe. And I think that is great, because like I said in my introduction, water and environment is a very broad topic, and it needs a lot of attention. I think under the Green Deal, it's extremely important to talk about biodiversity, to talk about forestry, to talk about system management. So my initial question to you was, how do we get the type of water management that will help to preserve our ecosystems and our biodiversity, or vice versa? What can people in those ranges and those expertise do to make sure that our water as part of the environment is preserved? And thank you for being in Brussels in the studio. I think you're a brave man. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lesha, and indeed it's a pleasure to meet some colleagues because we are too virtual for the moment, and so it's very nice. First, I would like to give the general framework of this biodiversity strategy that was adopted in May 2020, just as the first package of important communications with the Farm to Fork communication on agriculture. And really, I think there are two building blocks extremely important also for water management at the same level. So, and I will mainly focus on the international component because we are in this partnership conference. And clearly, the three pillars are the international ocean governance with a strong impact of the river management for the pollution, for example. On the trade policy, and sometimes we forget the export of water consumption due to the environmental European footprint. And clearly the trade policy has a strong impact on deforestation. It's well known. We have a specific communication on that, but also on the water consumption in many partner countries. And the third pillar that I will detail a bit more even is the international cooperation, where there's a commitment to increase the support of EU to the biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. It's really at the broad level. So I would like to a bit detail what we intend to do in this field. So just to tell you, in biodiversity we have three main pillars. The first one is the protection, sustainable use, and restoration of high biodiversity value areas. So the protected areas, but not only. The tropical forest, the wetlands, extremely important, the wetlands. And I will come back on one example, maybe later on if I have time. The second part is the wildlife and timber trafficking that is hugely impacting the biodiversity. And the last part, maybe as important as the first one, is how do we integrate biodiversity issues in all the key sectors, in agriculture, fisheries, energy. But I would add also in this slide water, because clearly the link between water and biodiversity and ecosystems is huge. So what is new in terms of cooperation, and this is where water management is coming, is the new approach that we have adopted for a few years now, is that we don't focus only on protected areas, only on defense of species, but really we try to manage large natural and human landscapes for multi-objectives, for the multiple objectives. It can be biodiversity, the fight against biodiversity loss, climate change, but also in the same territory, food provision, land, also land issue, water regulation is extremely important. And the two objectives of ultimate objectives are there, of course, are also the livelihood improvement and the stabilization of the region. So the idea, and you can see this very nice scheme that you can see in the middle there is a river, and it's not really by chance. Water is usually an element that really structure all the ecosystems and must be really managed in a very strategic way. So. And the link between biodiversity also and water provision and the livelihood is mainly through the notion of ecosystem services. So all the services the ecosystem is giving to the population, to the local people, but it can be also very far away. And so I can illustrate that by a few examples, but maybe I will start by just one example in Bolivia. And this is a very nice program that we are supporting It's called Watershed Initiative. Maybe the original name is different. It should be in Spanish. Done by the Natura Bolivia Foundation. And that's really reciprocal water agreements between the upper watershed farmers, so if you want, the producers of water, because due to their sustainable practices of agriculture, like agroforestry or agroecology, they guarantee the water provision and the water regulation, so that's important, upper watershed, and the consumer that are more in the cities. And so there are really those water agreements between those two stakeholders, if you want, have the objective to avoid deforestation on one side, but also to provide water. And they have some incentive package for the farmers, not money transfer, but more incentives in terms of input, water pumps, and so on, for really improve their livelihood also, because it's not only a way to protect the source of the rivers, but you need also to improve the livelihood of those people at the upper watershed. And so, and this is done through municipal water fund. So that's one aspect of how we can better manage the ecosystems at the benefit of the farmers in the ecosystem, but also at the benefit of the beneficiaries of clean water, because that's also the goal.
For me, that's an extremely clear story, Philippe. And I will come back to you later with maybe one or two questions. But maybe one thing that struck me, that you were making the connection with virtual water and trade, which I think is an often very forgotten element or impact. And the most trade people will tell you they don't understand what they have to do with water management and biodiversity. So maybe you want to chew on that a little bit, so I can come back to you with that. Another thing you mentioned is agriculture, and that brings me to our next speaker, which is Marlos de Souza. Marlos is the team leader for the Nexus, works in the Land and Water Division of FAO. And I think he has enormous experience in what it means to have good water management, what it means to have good agricultural management, and what all that means to water use and water impacts, including issues around pollution. So it's an enormous agenda, Marlos, I'm asking you to answer to, but I'm quite sure you can give us the highlights. And I know you're talking from Brazil today, normally from Rome. So welcome in our humble European space again, and I'm giving you the floor.
Thank you very much, Lesha, and good to be with all of you here today. As Lesha mentioned, so I was born in Brazil, a very rich country in water. And then 21 years ago, I moved to Australia, a very poor country, talking about water. So those two elements, they have contributed a lot to my, to my development on water management, and especially on water management in agriculture. So here today, we could stay here for the whole day or for the whole week talking about water and agriculture. Probably water and agriculture and water, they are the most, let's say, agriculture is the most dependent, human activity in relation to water management. With my colleagues at FAO, I used to say to them, making a joke, that we can produce food without soil, but we cannot produce food without water. So we are so dependent on water that without water, we won't be able to feed the people of this planet into the future. So even if we talk about rain-fed agriculture, or if we talk about irrigated agriculture, so water is the main factor for agricultural development. So in this regard, before we go into a little bit of more elements for discussion today, so if you think about agriculture and the issue of water for us, and again, putting together the two elements, irrigate and rain-fed agriculture. So nowadays we have more than 3 billion people that they live in agricultural areas with high to very high water shortage. So from those, you have 1.2 billion people living severely water-constrained agricultural areas. So if we think about water constraints and agriculture, so we have those two elements impacting on agriculture in different ways. So recurring drought, for example, is a limiting factor for rain-fed areas globally. And you have seen it for the last 20 years now, when climate change is exacerbating this issue. And we have the water stress to irrigate agriculture, which is a problem, and taking even a big impact to those that they are the marginalized population in developing countries, for example, such as women and pastoralists, for example. And the last big impact we have in this whole process is about the magnitude of climate change and the uncertainties we have at the moment on the impacts they may have, that climate change will have on agriculture. What we know that was published last year in our World Water Development Report, in the chapter about agriculture and climate change, is that higher temperatures are going to have a big impact on, I think, the most important factor in agriculture, which is the availability of soil water content. So higher temperature means that we're going to have higher evapotranspiration as well, which means that you need more water to produce the same quantity of food we have nowadays. So if we move from the first one, the first map is just an illustration of the impact on rain-fed agriculture caused by drought since 1984 until 2018. Then you can see the coverage of the impacts caused by drought. Even for countries like in Brazil now, the current time, we have a problem in south of Brazil with drought in some of the south states of Brazil that they usually are the biggest producers of soybeans here in Brazil, for example. So all around the news, and you can follow it. So next slide, please. So the next one is just to show that irrigated agriculture also has a big impact and is impacted by the availability of water. So those two elements, rain-fed and agriculture, or rain-fed and irrigated agriculture, we have to take in a serious way of how to manage water in a proper way and how to innovate. So can I go to my last slide about some quick conclusions? And I'll focus just on two of them in my last slide. I think one is about innovation, how we can innovate in a way of managing water, not just for irrigation, but for rain-fed agriculture as well. We do have solutions that we can try to implement to increase the resilience of rain-fed farmers. But I think the reuse of non-conventional source of water, for example, the reuse of treated water, water in agriculture. But thank you, Lesha, for the time and for the invitation. Thank you.
No, my absolute pleasure. Whoa, that's a big. Thank you, Marlos. And I think I just made one of our commenters happy because you were talking about groundwater, and he was complaining about the fact that we hadn't paid much attention to that yet. Although I think there was some mention in earlier sessions, but we can come back to that if you like, Marlos. But I think there are two things that you and Philippe have in common. That is the concern about water use, virtual water, water in trade. How can we handle that to preserve enough water for the environment, for biodiversity, and at the same time grow our crops? So you have some time to think over that one. Well, I go to really the other end of the globe, And I go to Stanzin Tsephel. He works for BORDA. He is the director of BORDA in South Asia. And BORDA is, I would say, a super duper specialist when it comes to wastewater management, wastewater treatment, decentralized wastewater systems, which also connects to another question I saw aimed at Nchedi. So you can think about that one, Nchedi, in the meantime, about non-sewered sanitation. And I think part of the question will be answered by Stanish. So please, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Lesha, and thank you, everyone. Unlike in the past, when all BORDA presentation is about wastewater in fecal sludge, this time for a change, it is not about this too, but about how do you solve water and sanitation problems through a nature-based solution. So it has a strong focus on the drinking water side of it. So I would make this case by giving you a small case study, which we have implemented, a project in a town called Leh in India, which is situated in the Trans-Himalaya. This town has a severe water and sanitation problem, reported in the media as a crisis, which I would narrate in my slides. And this project was supported by BMZ and the European Union. On the 26th is our Republic Day in India. And just 1 hour ago, I got a call that government recognized this as a very successful integrated project. And therefore, BORDA and all those who are linked, that the first time this joint award would be given on the Republic Day. So really happy to be here today on this day, sharing this project story with all of you. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's here only. Thank you. So this town, as I said, one slide back, please. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So this town is situated at the altitude of 5,000 meters above the sea. So it's really up in the higher Himalaya, which we call it Trans-Himalaya. And one may get impression that this is a very special case, as a special project may not have a bigger relevance. That wouldn't be true, because in India alone, out of the 36 provinces, as many as 11 of them are mountain region like Ladakh, and then Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, Afghanistan, even in Pakistan. So this whole Himalayan range has hundreds of towns and cities which share the same problem as this town. Oh, time is really moving fast. So this town has only 2 to 3 hours of water supply, and that too only for 6 to 7 months. Rest of the month, everything freezes. Yeah. So that's one side of the story. Well, other side, this town had good infrastructure in place. They have a Indus River. They are the source of water for the world, but they have a water problem. So when we had a look at this problem, it was actually not a water problem, but a management problem. There was enough water, there were infrastructure in place. It was just somehow not managed. Now this management is a very deep management problem. Example of this, why this crisis happened, is that before we put this new infrastructure in place, people were 90% dependent on the surface water, the snow-fed glacier water, which they knew how to manage it. Then the new system came, and all water were extracted from underground water. Now the 90% of the town water comes from the underground, which they don't know how to handle. So there's complete breakdown of the knowledge system. So result of this kind of various factor, there was a water management problem. So all in all, we try to tackle it through a nature-based solution. And one thing important for the nature-based solution was to go decentralized. Not necessarily, but most of the case, the more you make the bigger the project, kind of it mess up with the nature more. It's not necessary though, but it's always seems to be more the case. And so in something special about this project is water balance positive. We put a bulk meter. We said we would put in more water inside than how much we draw. And there's a with water comes the wastewater problem. So we have a fecal sludge management project there. And we also have a gray water treatment there, which is this cold region, they have a greenhouse. So we have linked this gray water to this green food production. Next slide, please. So a lot of conclusion and recommendation, I would perhaps in the interest of time only pick one. And that would be that, this huge number of Himalayan town in Asia, which needs this knowledge of how do you handle plumbing work in the cold climate. That's Asia itself do not have this knowledge. This Europe, Canada, America, the cold region have it. So I, through this forum, seek an appeal for a collaboration in the area of this. How do you manage water resources in extreme cold climate? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stanzin. Really interesting. And I like your appeal at the end, because we always seem to think that if you're in Asia, it's always hot. And if you're in Central Asia, it's always cold. And that we really need to consider what we're actually offering, or better not, ask first what the need is. And you are very clear that the need for this region might be different than what people usually assume. So thank you very much for that. And I think you made the perfect bridge to our next speaker, because Jennifer Williams is the Executive Director of the Fecal Sludge Management Alliance, which not many people might have heard from yet, but I'm sure after today you will be on their radar. And I think you're sort of at the end of the chain, aren't you? You have to deal with if water was treated, if we took out some water to reuse, then there's still the sludge. And what the hell are we going to do with that? So Jennifer, please enlighten us, and I'm giving you the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Lesha, for the introduction and for having me today. Greetings to everyone joining this session from various places around the world. Just waiting for the slide. There we go. And we can go to the first slide, actually. The FSM Alliance is a new organization, but the concept of fecal sludge management began to gain recognition in 2011 with the first FSM conference in Durban, South Africa. And this year we celebrate the 10-year anniversary of that event. Quite a bit of data exists on the sanitation problem, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the figures of this slide. The size of the problem is well documented. Sewer coverage hasn't been able to maintain pace with urbanization, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And in many urban centers, expanding sewers simply won't be feasible because they are so land, energy, and water intensive. But what is still unclear is how these people will receive safely managed sanitation by the year 2030. It is just around the corner, and we have to act quickly if we're hoping to make any progress against SDG 6.2. We need to start looking at climate resilient alternatives and how to implement those at scale. Next slide, please. So what is one of those alternatives? What is FSM? Fecal sludge management, or FSM, is an alternative solution to manage human waste in the absence of a sewer. It actually encapsulates more than just the final treatment stage, but actually the capturing in a container or a septic tank. It's then removed by manual emptying vacuum pump or truck, and then transported to a treatment facility. And it includes the principles of resource recovery and reuse as a key step to the process. And it removes the reliance on water to transport our waste. Fecal sludge is already being generated daily, and it needs to be safely collected, treated, and disposed of. Because where it's not being managed safely, it usually ultimately ends up polluting waterways or drinking water and contributing to the spread of waterborne illness and environmental pollution. FSM has largely been practiced informally, without the same standards and regulations and policies that have been adopted in the water sector or the wastewater industry. The EU chose to expand its wastewater treatment to all EU countries, and this was supported through EU directives, standards, and investments. A similar initiative is needed to expand FSM to keep pace with water scarcity, population growth, and urbanization. And the FSM Alliance is currently building a new initiative to develop an FSM sustainability standard as a catalyst to begin to formalize this sector. Next slide, please. A critical activity to this standard development will begin with building new partnerships, and it's been great to hear the support for removing silos over the past 3 days. We need to connect with urban planners, the building community, financial institutions, and multilateral partnerships like this one. Yesterday's discussion around the water-climate nexus and bridging the financing gap encouraged us to include sanitation more prominently in the discussion around how to build a green climate economy and the essential role sanitation will play in improving our cities' resiliencies and their abilities to respond to future global health epidemics. The European Commission has a history of supporting sanitation going back to the MDGs. Today, we urgently ask the European Commission and its partners in the ongoing programming cycle to allocate funding to the development of this standard and FSM implementation. And if anyone is interested in learning more about FSM, we invite you to join us at the virtual 6th International Fecal Sludge Management Conference, which will take place later this year, May 31st to June 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I think that was a good pitch. And I hope people will join your conference because I still think it's the last part of the chain that doesn't get enough attention yet and probably is crucial for preventing long-term environmental pollution, because you need to do something with the residue, even if you have treated your wastewater. And I think it's also very clear, both from what Stanit said and Jennifer said, that looking at unconventional systems, so not just always trying to do sewage-based transport, also because it uses too much water, needs alternative ways of dealing with the whatever comes out of the toilets and residues, but also what it means for impact on water pollution. You don't want to throw good water with bad water, do you? So having said that, I'm again going back to another part of the world, and inviting Sylvia Saravia. She works with ICLA, and they deal or they work with governments in mainly Latin America, but of course also in Europe and Sub-Sahara, depending on the topic, I would say. And they did a lot of, I would say, regional research, if I'm correct, on sustainable water management and the monitoring of the SDG programs. And she has a few interesting thoughts to share with us. So Sylvia, from, again, the ICLA region in this case, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lesha, and hello, everyone, and thank you for this invitation and the opportunity for sharing our work on nature-based solutions for water management. Next slide, please. Let's begin with a brief context of water challenges in the region. As many of you know, in Latin America, we are characterized by an abundance of water resources. On average, we have 4 times more the world average. However, most of it is concentrated in key ecosystems such as the Amazon or the Andes, while the demand for water is concentrated in cities and surrounding areas where economic activities concentrate. And in some of these areas, we report stress levels that are above 80% per month during dry season. At the same time, 80% of our population is concentrated in cities where 63% do not have access to safely managed sanitation and 18% do not have access to safely managed drinking water. Furthermore, wastewater is treated in insufficient percentages, most countries reporting less than 50% of wastewater treated in a safety manner. In fact, in Latin America, about a quarter of river stretches are affected by severe pathogenic contamination. Given this panorama, it is necessary to move from managing water quality in isolation to managing it jointly within a more integrated framework to safeguard the ecosystem. Also, in the context of climate change, where the availability of water will be increasingly variable in our region, it is necessary to improve our adaptive capacity and resilience of water supply systems.
Can you slow down a little bit, because I think our interpreters are getting a headache.
Oh, okay. Perfect. As long as you give me a little bit more time then.
Not really, but...
Right, so here it is it's essential to move from sectorial water management to comprehensive multi-sector and multi-actor management. and include and foster circularity and reuse. Next slide, please. In this respect, we believe that the concept of nature-based solutions is particularly relevant to address the water challenges that I just briefly explained to you, because this concept includes water, but also biodiversity, soils, agriculture, energy, and provision of ecosystemic services. Therefore, at ECLAC, we have developed a new study where we have created an inventory of over 200 experiences of nature-based solutions with a focus on the nexus between water, energy, land, food, and biodiversity. After systematizing and analyzing these initiatives, some of the lessons that we have learned in terms of public policy is that on one hand, we need a common framework to evaluate and better showcase the impact they have had, their cost in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, and on the other hand, the relevance of the traditional played in the successful outcomes for some of them. These experiences will be published later in the year, but I would just like to highlight a couple of examples. In terms of water availability, one of the nature-based solutions that responds to this challenge are water funds, similar to what we just heard about Bolivia, but at the city level. There are more than 20 cities in the region with the management of water funds. Their aim is to protect, to maintain watersheds that supply cities through the recovery of vegetation cover, through water management, environmental education, surveillance, and monitoring of priority areas. This type of mechanism contributes to the change of the traditional paradigm of using rivers towards living with rivers. Other example in the region boosting availability is the conservation of the Jalca ecosystem in local planning to ensure water supply in Peru, or the restoration of urban rivers in Pernambuco, Brazil, and the sacred sources of the Amazon in Ecuador and Peru to maintain water supply to communities. But nature-based solutions, as it has already been mentioned, can also be very useful for wastewater treatment. In this example, man-made wet farms that reduce organic matter and pathogens through natural processes are seen as very productive ecosystems. Other key elements are green urban infrastructures. And regarding these two, I can mention examples of treatment plants in the Metropolis, Brazil, and also the management of rainwater and urban revegetation in Medellin, Colombia. So I will not extend with the examples, and I will move on to the next slide.
I have 30 seconds left for this intervention.
Yeah. So basically, I just want to highlight that we will continue working with nature-based solutions under our Nexus program. And the main idea for us is that we need to move on a paradigm shift that responds to the current challenges of safeguarding natural resources in the face of climate change that will only continue to strengthen the interlinkages and our need to better manage the increasing trade-offs. So that's my last slide, where I leave you with my email, and looking forward to any future interaction or partnership if you're interested in this topic.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Well done. I want to point everybody to the fact that every one of our speakers asked you to enlighten yourself more, get in touch with them, that they offered their contacts. And please do so, because we think it's extremely important to work together with all these organizations from different angles, but also in the programming that the EU missions and the countries are starting to do for this cycle. And the more input they get upfront, the better. So I hope that the people from the EU missions who are online have taken note of all these offers for cooperation, because we really need to do that to make the programming worthwhile for all of us. Having said that, Philippe, I think you had a bit of time to think about a follow-up. And I think there are two issues here. One is, are you happy with the interventions you heard on nature-based solutions? Because there were a couple, or you want to add to that? And secondly, the other topic that came up a few times is virtual water, the role of trade. So would you care to comment on those two, or do you want one of your other examples to show up? I leave it to you.
Yes, maybe I can add a point on the nature-based solution. And I don't know if you still have a slide that I prepared on the specific situation that you have in Eastern DRC. No, before the slide, I guess. Before this one, yes. So we are in the Eastern DRC, very insecure part. And we have the Virunga National Park, oldest national park in Africa. But we have a strong demographic pressure, 4 million people, very high insecurity, but we have a treasure there, the national park, and we have the lake, and we have a kind of water tower in the middle of a very insecure population area. Sorry, and the problem is that how do we transform this water availability due to the ecosystem to prosperity? And there we had imagined that we could do it through energy. And energy usually is a bit the big dams and so on. We say it's against biodiversity. Here it can be really an asset for biodiversity. Because next slide, please. Yeah, next. You can go to the end of this one. No, there is plenty of. So the park is really the water storage, and from that we built some very small hydropower plants. And thanks to the hydropower plant, we can generate up to electricity for business and so on, and to 100,000 jobs. So that's something very interesting, where from the water we go through energy and then to jobs. And in this place, jobs means stability also. So that's a good example also where the nature-based solution is maybe not direct. It's not the direct management of the watershed that will help us in the stability and the livelihood. So just one example that I wanted also to highlight for the first part of your question. For the second part of your question, indeed, we have in the Commission a very good center at the Joint Research Center, which is the scientific hub of the Commission. And they have a few years ago, I think 7 years ago, sorry, they developed a study on the water consumption by EU citizens, and also the imported water. And it seems that 40% of the water is imported through mainly three commodities: cocoa, cotton, and coffee. And it represents up to 2,000 liters per day and per citizen. So it's quite huge. And for that, we try also to work with the producer countries. For example, for the moment, my colleagues in the agriculture unit, they work with Côte d'Ivoire, so Ivory Coast, and Ghana, to develop more sustainable value chain of cocoa. And it means that in this case, of course, the social safeguards are essential, so to avoid the child labor, but also the environmental safeguards. And it can be two aspects. The first one is, of course, deforestation-free commodities, but it can be also a better management of water resources. That's just a concrete example where we have to work on all the aspects. And the trade aspect, it's of course the provisions in the free trade agreement. Mercosur is a good example. What can we insert in the agreement itself? But we should also work with the producer countries to develop the value chain that respect the social values, which are part of the DNA of the European Union, and also the environmental values. That is the other part of the DNA. You remember the DNA has a two chain of nucleic acid, and the second one is the environmental part, and the social part is the first one. And so this is really how I see the point, but we need definitely to work also on the agricultural practices to improve the agroecology, agroforestry, that also have a strong impact on the water cycle locally. I would like to insist, it's also what is important is the good management of the resources by good practices. The Great Green Wall that you are also promoting can be an example to improve the access to water resources and to decrease the conflicts.
Okay. Thank you very much, Philippe. And having brought up all these issues, I mean, just as a remark from my side, there is something called the Water Stewardship Standard. And I still think that it would be really worthwhile for not just the companies, but also the countries to look at the criteria in that standard, because in some cases they might be able to help also in the chain management that you just mentioned. But you also made a few remarks that I thought might be a nice way for Marlos to come back in and give us a little bit more thoughts on the connection between agriculture and nature-based solutions, but also this virtual trade issue. I know it's a big package, but so I'll let you pick, but maybe you want to comment a little bit on that. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe something like the World Water Quality Alliance might be something that can help here, but I don't know whether you're familiar with that. I give you the floor, Marlos.
Thank you, Lesha. I think the water trade is a so, let's say, complex concept. When you are developing your ideas or discussions about it, if you get, for example, Brazil as one of the biggest producers of food globally. So Brazil, just 3 months ago, Brazil was importing rice, from other countries as well. So I think one missing element in this whole discussion about virtual trade is this trade balance, in the same way as what we do in terms of, associate dollars against what is exported to what is imported into the country, is pretty much the same when we are discussing about water trade, especially in agricultural products. So what the country is exporting, but what the country is importing, and how to do this water balance. I think this is the first complexity. The second one is how you apply the water footprint. So it's upcoming a paper now that I'm one of the authors that we did for livestock, for example, the application of water footprint and the two different concepts we have globally, how to calculate it. So it took us almost 2 years to get a kind of an agreement between the two different concepts, and it's coming up. And if you get some hydrologists, they're gonna have a big discussion about how you calculate it, coming from, for example, the livestock in Brazil, the livestock in Australia, how we produce, intensive against extensive and those things. So I think water trade is important factor, but we need to really complete the equation. At the moment, we see just from the exporting side of a country, we don't see the importing part of the country as well, to do this balance between what's exported as water, what's imported as water. And then getting to what Philippe was talking about before, agriculture, as FAO, we are pushing the member states for, for example, irrigation modernization, to be more efficient, to be more, to increase productivity of agriculture, especially the irrigated agriculture. But, it's upcoming, as Lesha knows, it's upcoming a brief from the UN Water related to water use efficiency. And really, if we don't put together increasing efficiency with policies from governments to free the water from efficiency back to other activities, including the environment, then increasing efficiency in agriculture doesn't mean directly that water is going to be freed to other users or to the environment. So farmers, they may increase the size of their own crop production, irrigate the land, because now they have a more efficient system and they can irrigate more land with the same water allocation they had before. So it is extremely important. So just going to modernization and efficiency in agriculture and irrigation, especially irrigation, doesn't mean that we're going to have water available to other sectors. And finally, I think just touching slightly on NBS, on nature-based solution. So this is what we are pushing as well. We are pushing for, especially for rain-fed agriculture, we are pushing for them to use more NBS, for them to increase the capacity of the soil content, the soil water content, that they don't need to, or they are more resilient to the impacts of drought, for example, the future impacts of climate change. So pretty much, I think NBS is a new name for something that a lot of farmers they have been doing for centuries. For example, keeping the rest, the residues of the previous crop on the top of the soil to protect the soil and to decrease the evaporation from the soil is something that nowadays we call it NBS, but before they used to deal it as no-till. So it's coming back finally. So they're understanding that is a win-win situation for the farmers as well. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to innovate using, old concepts or ideas. Thank you, Lesha.
No, thank you, Marlos. I think it's very important that you point to the fact that there is a lot of long-standing traditional knowledge that we might not always appreciate these days, but that we can still learn from, and maybe we can better what we already have, but doing it the other way, just forgetting all these lessons learned through the ages is also not very sensible. Nchedi, if you're still with us, right? Could you switch on your camera again? I think there were two questions which were sort of aimed at you. One was a question around using non-seweraged sanitation. You could also say using eco-sanitation or dry sanitation, and how you're coping with that in South Africa, and whether you think that decentralized systems for wastewater could help. And I think there was another connected question about the reuse of water. I found it very interesting that you said that. A lot of our colleagues started to say, no, it's not wastewater, it's used water that you can reuse. So can you elaborate a little bit on that, on how you're using these different insights in South Africa in the policy?
Thank you very much, Lesha. Definitely in the past 2 years, South Africa started actually fully trying to go and adopt and consider the issue of dry sanitation. And that definitely is one issue that we are forced to look at, because you would know that South Africa is an arid country. We are really not having that much water that we can just use as we wish. And that being the case, the policy was developed around it. And currently there are universities and schools where we are piloting this dry sanitation issue. But remember that one other thing that pushes us to that level is that South Africa has got a lot of different kind of terrains. There are people who are actually up in the mountains where it's difficult for the government or even municipalities to put together infrastructure that takes water to those kind of areas. Therefore, this kind of sanitation, this kind of technology works for them, because if we are to really achieve a universal access to sanitation, we need to come up with a alternative kind of technologies that will cover for that. And the TZO 3500 technology is one of the is the one that actually South Africa is considering. And the other issue that makes us actually consider that is that definitely will save on water. Definitely it is cheaper than having to put together infrastructure that should actually take pipes up and down the mountains and valleys of South Africa. And therefore, for us, currently, it works. We piloted with some of the rural areas and the schools in the rural areas, and we see it working. But on policy issue, definitely it's part of the policy. And the issue is that we are trying to see how, because there are two issues that are now giving us a great challenge as a country. One, you would know, everybody knows probably as part of this delegation now, that we have a challenge of pollution in our rivers. Our rivers are highly polluted. We are having a challenge with our sewer power stations. They are not working, some of them, because of the challenges in the municipalities. Therefore, those are the other issues that makes us think that it will be better to, instead of repairing some of the technologies that we've been using, would rather go for the cheaper ones that are workable, that would suit even our rainfall system and the kind of water that we depend on for now. And reusing of water, definitely it's one option that we are on. The grey water using for our sanitation or storage system is the one that should actually alleviate South Africa from using a lot of fresh water for the issues of storage. And also for agriculture, we are trying to go strong onto the reusing of water so that we can alleviate the system on clean water. So definitely our policy is growing more tentacles. We are trying to cover the space and cover all the technologies that can assist the country to move faster on what we want to achieve.
I'm impressed, Nchedi, always about the broad knowledge you have on all these different elements of the policy. And I think it's also interesting that a country like you is really seriously looking into decentralized systems in reusing water to make it better management of your rivers. And I do understand that that is a huge challenge. But maybe other countries, but also other experts can help you in the future with that. And I think another reoccurring element is that you are also stressing that we shouldn't think that all the problems in a country or a region are the same. So that, for instance, mountains areas have a very different impact and problems than the ones on the flatland. You wanted to say something, Nchedi, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to you that when the first speaker spoke about the issues of environment, I really thought that is very key and important for us, because as a country, if you follow some of our news on environment, you will see that we have a lot of informal settlements that are right on the borders of our rivers. Therefore, those people definitely for now do not have a lot of services, including the issue of trying to get them to get spaces where to throw their litter and all of this. And for them, because it's illegal and they feel that the litter must go somewhere, they put in our rivers. Hence, you would know, Lesha, we had our presentation in the past with the women in Ottawa that we had something that we called Adopt a River. We had women who were actually working full-time in our rivers every day, trying to pull out all the dirt so that we can have our rivers better taken care of. Therefore, the population issue goes with environment, goes with how we are able to cover for basic services for everyone. And in the absence of basic services, this is what you find: pollution and all of those things, and people not being able to be covered in terms of human rights, water, sanitation, even your health and everything, even including education, because all of that are basic human rights that as the population grows and they are outside the planning that we had as a country, definitely it's going to take us a few more years to be able to cover for the new demand that comes with it. Thank you.
No, Nchedi, I had wanted to ask you about Adopt a River, so I'm glad you you mentioned it. And it's a really interesting project. If anybody wants to know more, talk to me, talk to Nchedi. It's a wonderful project. And what I think is also interesting, what you said, I don't think I've heard make that connection so clearly, that if there is a lack of basic services, in this case wash, basically you're creating pollution. Because what the hell are people supposed to be doing, you know? Because, besides squatting somewhere or dump everything in the river. So I think that is another angle when it comes to basic services. It is a human right, yes. It is essential for our health, but it also prevents pollution. And I think that is a very interesting conclusion. I'll keep that one on top of my list, actually. Thank you so much, Nchedi.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator.
I'm going back to Jennifer. You mentioned two things. One is that, if I'm correct, I might do you injustice or Starnage, I'm not sure. One of you mentioned ecosystem services. And I'm sure you have an opinion on that. So how can ecosystem services, or as I like to say, services to the ecosystem, help us with better water management, but also improve in better environmental management? Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll comment just briefly. I think it was Stanzin that mentioned this. Even the word ecosystem sort of lends us to think about that we need to be, again, removing the silos from all of these. And I think, to your point you mentioned earlier, sometimes when you try to make a solution in one area, it creates a problem in another. So I do think that the only way that we can address ecosystem issues is to look at an entire system together and work together holistically. So that would just be my brief comment there.
That means I'm going to Stanzin. Sorry, I did you injustice, but I would really like to know your idea about the ecosystem services remark.
To be very precise, I did not spoke in the direction of ecosystem services, but more of using a nature-based solution instead of more of electromechanical, non-nature-based solution. So in our project, to give a very specific example, to go a natural way, we said, let's keep things small, keep it locally. We don't transport water from kilometer to kilometer, just extract water locally and recharge it locally. B, we use the gravity-based systems so that you can avoid pumps, chemicals, aerators, and all that. Yeah. Then the third is we use as many traditional and locally available plants for water treatment and other. So yeah, around that area that we worked on.
Okay. Sylvia, I know there was more you wanted to tell about the activities in your region. Is there something, now you've heard the other speakers, that you really would like to add to what you said before?
I think I will take up on your question on ecosystem services, because from our experience, nature-based solutions have been pivotal in this respect. And so that you get maybe an idea, here in region, about 7 or 9 years ago, there was a study about the economic value per inhabitant on the provision of economic services. And just in South America, that was about $33,000 US per year. I mean, these systems that allow us to have water provision, flood regulation, drought prevention, support systems, the ecosystems, they help us with, water retention in the soil, the nutrient cycle. All of these, they translate into this economic value through the services that they provide us in agriculture and so on. And out of our study, basically, we had that out of the I mentioned there were 200 cases of nature-based solutions that we referred to, but out of 100 of them that mainly focus on food security, about 1/3 of them were aimed at the recovery and maintenance of ecosystems. So our next step actually in our program is to provide better evidence. One thing, better evidence on nature-based solution, their cost-benefit analysis, and the integration, as Marlos said, the integration and the better valuation of traditional knowledge that is already present within the native population of Latin America, and how their knowledge is helping us push forward what we call today nature-based solutions. But of course, they've been traditional practices that we need to better value and incorporate.
Okay. So we're getting closer to the end of our session. So I want to invite all the panelists to maybe give me a Twitter on what they would conclude or be their final message to this session. I, of course, will start with Nchedi. Nchedi, do you have a Twitter for us?
Yes, thank you so much, Lesha. You know, as we were all talking, and thanks to all the panelists and speakers who came in today, because what now comes to my mind is that, you know, nature is something very, very interesting. It's a give and take situation. If you don't take care of your environment, definitely environment will give you what you deserve, which is a disaster. In the past, we used to say that water manifests itself, I mean, a lot of disasters manifest themselves through water. We were talking floods, droughts, and all of that. But you look at it today, the issue of pollution is seemingly taking center spot, because only last week I heard on TV that with the masks that we put to prevent ourselves from contracting corona, people are throwing them in the rivers and seas. And now all the species in the seas are carrying the mask on their backs and all of those things. That's a natural disaster that's coming our way. So when you try to deal with this one, another disaster comes. But for some funny reason, water is in the center of all these disasters, which we really need to look at. And I think environmentalists must come closer to water to make sure that we help each other not to continue with all these disastrous situations. Thank you.
So COVID also needs waste management, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if our species are carrying masks for no reason, I do not know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Nchedi. Philippe, your last soundbite or Twitter.
Yes, normally when I try to make a tweet, I try to be extremely good, because it's part of the job. And so I take many hours to think about 200 characters, so it's difficult. But maybe it would be centered about, anyway, the necessity to take care of the water resource for biodiversity and vice versa. It could be something like healthy ecosystems are crucial for clean water, and something, but I don't find the right formula for the opposite. Really showing that the two must be tackled together. We cannot provide clean water and take care about sanitation if we don't take into account the resources. In the same time, we cannot expect high healthy ecosystems, wetlands, but also tropical forests, if we don't have the forest. That's why it's really the planet must be tackled all together. So it's something that would be around that. But
seems clear to me. Thank you, Philippe, again. Marlos.
Yes, Sasha. Yes, Lesha. So my tweet, okay. So my tweet for today would be, agriculture is a gift of nature. Let's treat nature well, and agriculture will flourish even more. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you. And there's somebody in the tech division in our organizers who is now frantically typing this to actually put it on Twitter. So thank you. Stanzin, your tweet.
Thank you. I'm not a tweeting person, but would today, as a call of duty, would say a line of tweets. Well, this phrase that nothing can stop an idea which time is ripened. So I think nature-based solution time is ripened. It cannot be stopped. So join the force.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jennifer.
In times of crisis come innovation, and I think we're all experiencing the current COVID crisis. So let's transform this into an opportunity to make the positive changes we'd like to see for the future.
Thank you. Sylvia.
Right. I think I would just stress that we need to move from sectorial management of natural resources and the byproducts of our uses of these resources into a more comprehensive management, where the adoption of Nexus approach, circularity principles, as well as the nature-based solutions that we've been discussing will be pivotal to address our current water challenges.
Okay, thank you. Well, I hope in the meantime I addressed some of the questions in the Q&A. If we did you injustice, I apologize and let us know. There will be a slide coming up now where you can continue the conversation, if that's what you want, with the different organizations that were participating today or the alliances that can actually help in furthering this agenda. And my dear friends, can you bring up that slide? Yes. No, that's not the one. There's another one. The last slide with the website of some of the alliances. Like Susanna, like follow-up networks, the slide is called. Well, we'll try and get it up while I slowly close down this session. I want to thank again all my wonderful speakers. Thank you so much for not only your original presentation, but also responded to each other. It's great. It means that there's more basis for. I think another one is to thank the tech team in Brussels and to thank the intern doing a great job. I know this is not an easy week for you all. And I hope we will continue this conversation and make sure that in the programming of the EU, with the EU missions and in the national capitals, you will connect to others, all these experts, talk to them, take their advice on board, their expertise on board, and let's make wonderful, good programming for the next cycle, where we connect all these different areas, not work in silos, but coordinate horizontally with all this expertise. The slide I was talking about got lost a little bit in process, but it will come on the website. So if you then want to connect to some of these organizations, please do so. And with that, I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you again for your participation and hope to connect with all of you again very soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Lesha. Lesha, thank you so much.
Chris.
And thank you to all of the panelists. And Philippe, next to me, thank you very much for joining me as well. So I'm not at all my lonesome as I had been for the last 2 days before that. Tomorrow we'll have, of course, more. Tomorrow we continue at 12:30 again, CET. Today we've been talking about the environment, about jobs linked to water. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about water as a human right. In fact, we heard on the opening day that water is not only a human right, it's a question of dignity. as well. Dignity for women, for men, for children as well. So we're going to be talking about that, among other things, and looking forward, pitching it forward. Where do we go from here in developing these international partnerships? A very high-level set of conversations we'll have tomorrow.